Hello everybody, today I want to talk about how a track progresses because I think it is an interesting way to kind of look at the production process in the steps that I take to write out a full track, especially given that my tracks are such big products. As you can see, this one is reaching, in this case, 210 tracks, but it's nowhere near finished. As you can see, I need to write a whole third drop here, and there's still a lot of different details to add. So this is definitely one of those tracks that is going to go over 300 tracks in total in the project. And what, in my opinion, is the most interesting is how that all takes shapes and how that all kind of comes together over a longer period of time. Because when it comes to my production process, I do really like taking everything in stages and everything being like slightly clearly defined of how I go about writing new parts. But that doesn't mean that I'm very systematic in the way that I'm writing, in the sense that I go one section at the time, or I go one sound type at the time, or something like that. You know, what I much rather like to do is have different moments where I'm working more on detailed parts of the track, where I'm working maybe more on just adding new ideas. Maybe sometimes I'm just reevaluating a lot of the ideas in the track. So of course, taking it from the beginning, what happens usually with my tracks is I start with the kick and bass and the drums, like most producers do. And then I pretty quickly lay out the entire structure that I'm planning on writing around. And I like doing this because I prefer this much more over trying to add elements into loops and then extending those loops into full sections of the track. I feel like that usually gets very boring because you're then thinking in the idea of loops as opposed to thinking about the idea as a whole over the length that it needs to play. Say, for example, this big melody guy over here. This is an idea, of course. It starts like this, but transforms into something like this. And here it goes into the break where it slows down. As you can see, this used to be much longer and it used to be part of the build-up as well. But again, ideas change, so therefore that was actually altered. But the main way that I'm doing that, and the main way that I'm like kind of deciding upon what the changes are that need to be made to a sound over the course of the production, is due to the fact that it's already an idea in a finished track. You can also see that I don't have like sketch patches to the side and any of those kind of things. Whenever I'm sketching out a new idea, I like to do that with sketchbooks, which I've talked about before. But therefore, having a like finished structure in mind that you can write against is much more beneficial for my way of writing. And that brings me to, I guess, the main stage of the production, which is just adding ideas to the track slowly. And the way that I like to go about it is I like to consider each section like slightly finished before I move on to the next one. So currently I'm in the stage of starting the experimentation for drop number 3 and trying to find out everything that I want to put in there. But when it comes to everything before it, you can see in terms of one shots, I'm pretty much there. You can see there's pads and atmospheres in every part. You can see there's some effects in every part. There's some vocals in every part. So all of the detail sounds, apart from the main sequences and some of the backing sequences, are also in there. You can see there's a whole bunch of drums and fills, and all of those things have been taken care of for like the majority of the track. It's not finished. It's not close to the final. Like, I wouldn't say that everything that you're going to hear in this is going to be the final part of the track, say, or even in this part. And that is because the way that I like to write is, as I said, I'm not the kind of guy that is very systematic, in the sense that, okay, I'll start writing on this part now. I'll start introducing the sounds for this part and getting new ideas and getting cool things in there. But sometimes I just want to write a little bit of the intro. Or sometimes I want to edit some of the details of this drop over here. And sometimes I want to work out a new transition over here. Or sometimes I want to delete this element here and start over with this particular element. I personally don't think that restricting yourself to just working on one individual section at the time is the right way to do it. And therefore, I'm rather free-flowing in the way that I move around in the project from the start of the project to the end of the project, while still almost linearly like writing out the project over time like this. So this is kind of the point right now where I'm adding all of the new stuff and I'm coming up with all of the like main ideas that need to come in this part of the track. Whereas here, I'm still working on all of the details and making small changes, making changes to like fills and transitions and that kind of stuff. But also, I'm gonna have moments where I'm gonna be reevaluating actual ideas in the track and seeing if everything that I've added to the track up until this point still works. The way that I do that is I have this really basic system in the sense that because most of my sounds are restricted to one part of the track, any idea that I don't like, I can just go in here and say orange if I don't like it, red if it needs to be deleted, or yellow if it needs a smaller change. And there are just going to be moments in the project where I'm like, okay, hey, I need to listen to this project. Usually when I've not touched the project for a while, I also like, when it comes to production, have multiple projects going on that aren't all finished. And I like to let them brew for, say, a month or two that I haven't worked on them, then get back into it and then do all of this judging so that I'm in there with a fresh ear. I hear all of the ideas. I say, this works, this doesn't work. Let's fix all of the things that don't work. And then let's continue adding new stuff to the track. And usually those are the moments where the track really comes to life for me and really goes to the next level, in the sense that even with this track, as good as it's sounding right now, I know that once I get to a point where the track is like finished all the way through and I let it brew for a little bit and I let my mind, get distracted with other productions, get to learn new techniques, get to find a new approach to music production for a little bit. Once I then dive back into this project, I'm going to have a fresh ear. I'm going to have a fresh way of doing things. And that is only going to improve the track more drastically than just working on it continuously, trying to get it to, a stage where it actually sounds good. So within the writing process itself, one of the crucial parts of the writing process is actually not writing the track in an interesting way. Now, the next process, as you guys probably know, is going to be the mixing process. That is where I export each individual stem and then I import them back into Reaper, and that is where I do my actual mixing. That doesn't mean that the track that I'm writing here doesn't have any mixing in there, in the sense that I don't not set volumes, or I'm not worried about any form of EQing and that kind of stuff. But the mixing process for me is really a rebalance of all of the sounds without being able to actually change the ideas. As I've said up until this point, it is really about all of the ideas that I'm putting in there in the production stage. And in this process, that is still what I'm doing. I'm adding ideas to the track and I'm still changing a lot of the ideas. But at some point, I have to say okay, this is all of the ideas that I want for the track. Now the idea generation is finished and I have to take all of those ideas and actually make them fit together in a technical mix perspective, in a mix kind of way. So then that is the next stage. That is the mixing stage. Of course, that also starts with an initial mix. Then I start doing revisions on my own mix. I start doing the whole main listening process for the mix in a whole bunch of different places and trying to find, okay, what is the exact right tonality that this track needs to have. And then we slowly get to a final mix. And then that final mix is going to go for one final check process where I just have a whole list of checks that I do on there in terms of how is the balance for the track? Is there not any stereo information in the low frequencies? Is there clarity enough in the high frequencies? I have a little bit of a checklist that I can run through and I can see. It's also where I do a lot of the referencing still to see if it's in balance with music that other people have made. And then we get into the final master. And then once again, I have a few more checks that I do and then it's ready for release. So that is my process for developing tracks over time. I just wanted to run through that as quickly as I could. If you enjoyed this kind of talkative content, if this is informative, let me know by leaving a like and make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Another way to support me is by, of course, supporting me financially. There's two ways that you can do that. You can either do that by becoming a premium member, which you can do here on YouTube by becoming a YouTube member. You can do it on Patreon, or you can do a Twitch subscription. All three of those give you extra benefits like early access to videos, priority in feedback streams, and discount codes to my products. Speaking about my products, another way to support me is by checking out those products, which you can do in the link in the description. There's actually 3 links to 3 different stores, so you can have the maximum shopping experience. So thank you if you checked it out. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.